What will check constraint do? A check constraint checks for a specific condition before inserting the data into a table. If the data passes all the check constraints, then the data will be inserted into the table. Otherwise, the data for insertion will be discarded. The check constraint ensures the data of all values in a column satisfies certain conditions. So what happens in check constraints, as we discussed earlier also, basically we are checking, like there should be a specific value and the value should match a specific criteria. If the criteria is matching, then only we will be inserting the data, right? If not, then we will ignore that. And here also we can define the constraint in two ways. The first is while creating the table DDL, right? We can add this keyword constraint and we can give a constraint name, which will help us identify what kind of constraint we are enforcing, right? So for example, if it is check ID greater than 100, we can give a constraint name like ID more than 100 so that we know what this constraint is doing. If we simply write ID more than 100, right, when it fails, so nobody will be able to understand what this constraint is doing. So constraint name we use just as an identifier, which will help us understand why we created this constraint at the first place. And again, there are two ways. First, while creating the table, and then second, you can alter the table and add a constraint. Clear till this point?
Yes, here the constraint name is generic, right, bro? Anything
Generic,
you can give
anything
it,
you can give. Yes, that is up to you, what you want to give.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let's see how this check constraint works now. So we will create a new table employees check. So we already have a constraint in this table, which is essentially the not null constraint. Let's add a check constraint on the salary, right?
Okay.
So we have a constraint keyword. Constraint name is salary more than 5,000, let's say, and then the constraint function. Actually, so what we want to check, salary should be more than 5,000, right? So this name is optional.
Yes, bro.
Right? So constraint keyword, constraint name, which helps us identify why we are adding this constraint. So what we are checking salary should be more than 5,000. And let's create this table now.
Here the check is the keyword, right, bro?
Yeah, this check is the keyword. Correct. So we have created this table. Now let's try to insert some data, right? Structure is same. So let me copy these records from here. So we have this table name as employees check. So first value, this is the ideal value, which is fine. We have a not null constraint. So if you give null here, it should not insert. So there is one more values. So the next employee is 102. The name is say Sam. She is a female, and her salary is 4,000. So first, let's try to insert this record. So it got inserted. Fine. Let's try to insert this record. If not, it will not insert because we have a not null constraint on the employee ID table, employee ID column. So it could not insert this record. So then we also have a constraint now, additional constraint, where we are checking the salary should be more than 5,000. So we created an employee with the ID 102. She is a female and her salary is 4,000. So when we try to insert this record, it fails. It says like the statement conflicted with the check constraint, salary more than 5,000. And this is the constraint name that we gave, which helps us to identify, right? And since the salary is less than 4,000, it did not allow us to insert this record into the table. So this kind of scenarios we can do in production, right? So any employees who joins a company should have some basic salary, minimum salary. It cannot be less than 10,000 in India, at least for big MNCs. So that kind of check we can keep in place. And if I change it to 5001 also, it will insert because it is more than 5,000, and we can check that using select statement. Select star from check employees. So you see Sam's record got inserted now, right? So this is one way. So first way, what we did, we defined the constraint while creating the table itself. Now I want to add one more constraint on the gender column, and I want to make sure the gender value should be should be male or female. We cannot take any other value here. Okay? So gender should be male or female. So how we will do? We'll add an alter statement. Alter table employees check. What we need to do? We need to add a constraint, and constraint name gender male or female, right? And what do we want to do? We want to check the gender should be equal to male or gender should be equal to female. Only if these two values are there, M or F, you insert. If not, it should not let us insert the record. So let's run this alter statement. So done. So we have these statements. Let's try to insert one more employee in this table. This time value is 3. Let's make it Rahul, and male gender we gave it as male. For example, salary should be more than 5,000. So let's give him 10,000 as the salary, right? So all the constraints are satisfied. Now not null is satisfied. This salary part is satisfied, but we added one more constraint now. Gender should be M or F. It cannot take male value, right? Even though it sounds correct, but when you try to insert male, it will throw an error. It says check constraint gender male or female failed, right? Because we have a constraint gender value can only be male or female, nothing else apart from this. So when we do this, it fails. But when we just change it to M, it will allow us to insert the record. And then if we go and do a select on this table, we will see the entry for Rahul as well. Right? So this is how check constraint works. So you can define the constraint, while creating the table. And for some reason, if you forget to do that while creating the table, you can always use this alter command to create the constraint on any column. So there is a slight difference between the syntax for not null. So in not null, in case of alter command, you have to first alter the table, then alter the column, and just add not null along with the data type. But in case of check constraint, you just have to alter the table, then you have to use the keyword add constraint. You are not going to alter the column again, because the column data type is not changing, or column definition is not changing. It's same. Just you are adding a check on the column. So you have to add the syntax as alter table name, add constraint, a constraint name. This is optional. If you don't give this part also, right, it works fine. So you can write this alternatively like this also. Alter table employees check, add constraint. Sorry, not add constraint. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yes. You need to add constraint. Right?
Add constraint, and constraint name is optional. You can just put like this.
Yes.
Right? This also works. So this name is optional. You don't have to specifically give a name here. So these both commands will work fine. Right? So clear on the check constraint, how it works, and what is the use case of this.